On June 30th, 2015, our 6-year-old daughter, Avery Huffman, was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor known as DIPG. It's a terminal brain cancer that we had never heard of until the day of her diagnosis. Just a few days before her diagnosis, my wife, Amanda, had noticed that Avery's eye was inverted. So we took her to an ophthalmologist thinking it was just an eye issue. And the ophthalmologist said, come back the next day, and he wanted to do an MRI. We did the MRI, thinking it was still just an eye-related issue. He told us then in the ophthalmologist's office that it was a brain tumor, to get down to Mary Bridge Children's Hospital in Tacoma. So we quickly got down to Mary Bridge, waited for about an hour and a half before we were given the news that basically shattered our entire world. And that was that Avery had diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, and there was no surgery, there was no way to operate on it, and there was no cure. It was a Tuesday evening, and I remember our older 2 kids and our youngest were all at home with my cousin, and I needed to get back and at some point fill them in what was going to happen, but I wanted Amanda to be there with me. So we waited a day to talk to them. We wanted to get a second opinion, so we went up to Seattle Children's Hospital the day after her diagnosis, and they went over her MRI and they said the same thing. I remember the night of her diagnosis laying in bed, and by bed I mean one of those horribly uncomfortable chairs at the Children's Hospital. Your head's just spinning. You can't sleep, you can barely breathe. And I Googled DIPG, and the images that popped up of children that had been fighting DIPG and the after effects of steroids and radiation and treatment just horrified me. And I kept thinking, even earlier, I said, this can't be happening to my little girl. And then I see these pictures, and you're like, this can't happen to her either. So your head's spinning. You never even knew what those 4 letters meant in succession, and then you see it and you read it and you're just blown away. You know, when you hear of a brain tumor, you hear often about how people have surgery on brain tumors, and that was our question for the doctor. Okay, it's a brain tumor, when will surgery happen? And when she said there would be no surgery, we said, well, then what? Does she live with it? And then that's when the word came, well, there is no surgery, and this is the lifespan that's expected. Your head is just spinning, and you want to research it and see what there is to learn, but at that point, you're still in just a state of shock. So it took a few days to learn, but you went from thinking it was just an eye issue that maybe some patches would fix, to 3 days later beginning a radiation cycle that was basically putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound at that point. Probably about halfway through Avery's radiation treatments, one night during the week, our friend Darren and Rob had said, hey, meet me up at Starbucks. We want to introduce you to somebody who's in our neighborhood who wants to do something for you. His foundation, the foundation that he's a part of, they want to do something for you. And I went up to that Starbucks that night and really didn't know a whole lot of what I was getting into or who I was talking to or what this was going to be about. But by the time I left that meeting at Starbucks, I think we saw again just how much our community meant to us. And I met Brian, and he said, we want to do something for Avery. What is it? What can we do? What can we do that's going to bring a smile to her face? And we were getting close to her being done with radiation wrapping up. And I remember Brian saying, we can do some kind of celebration on her last day of radiation. And it was kind of that light bulb moment. And she loved the movie Frozen. That was her favorite movie. And I think right at that point, she'd become kind of an international celebrity. And international, she had over 3 million views on YouTube with a phone call from Kristen Bell. So Frozen was a big part of her, who she was. And so Brian said, well, we're going to make something happen. And so on the final day of her radiation, a limo picked us up from our house, took her down to radiation, and she did her final 30th round. And that afternoon, the limo took us down to lunch on the waterfront in Tacoma at the Ram, a place that brought us great memories, even though it was just a month before, but it was the before. And several of her friends that she was in school with came to be a part of that. There was a Princess Anna and a Princess Elsa that came and had the girls giggling and singing and smiling and laughing. And whenever that video pops up on our phone, we just, it brings tears to our eyes because you just see the laughter and the joy in Avery's face. Even though her body was still failing her, her spirit wasn't, and her friends were right there. And there's a great picture that we have that all her friends around her giving her a big hug and just, made her feel like she was still one of them. It wasn't just limited to the day after radiation, and over the course of those months, and then even after, the opportunity to be a part of such a remarkable foundation in our community that really is geared towards the families, and just giving those families hope, giving those families some laughter, giving those families happiness, giving those families joy, and more importantly, not just for the kid that's fighting, but for the brother and the sisters. You know, a lot of times they're the collateral damage, and how much See You Later Foundation makes the whole family, but especially the brother and sisters, you know, feel like, you know, we're supporting you here too. You know, we are on your side too. We want what's best for you too. You know, I can't even describe how much that means to myself and my wife to see our other kids be able to experience and have that happiness and laughter as well.